So 1 week ago, as we reported here, the Republican-controlled legislature in Wisconsin, backed up by both the state and then the federal Supreme Courts, insisted on holding their statewide election in the middle of a pandemic with really no special or extraordinary dispensations for folks. And predictably, it was a crazy scene. In Milwaukee, only 5 polling places were open out of the usual 180 because there weren't enough available poll workers. So we saw huge lines of people waiting to vote in masks, some expressing their frustration with signs like this one that went viral saying, appropriately, "This is ridiculous." The Republican State Assembly Speaker wore a mask, gloves, and a protective gown to tell everyone it was, quote, incredibly safe to go out. Basically, the whole thing was a travesty for public health and also a shockingly cynical move by state Republicans. They clearly thought that holding this race amidst a pandemic would suppress turnout and then help their chances in the hotly contested battle for a state Supreme Court seat with a conservative incumbent endorsed by the president. I mean, they basically tried to say to the voters of Milwaukee and Wisconsin, your vote or your life. And it backfired. Astonishingly, the liberal challenger for that Supreme Court seat, Jill Karofsky, won by 10 percentage points. She ousted the conservative incumbent. Overall turnout was down from 2016, and around 80% of all votes were cast for absentee, thankfully. But Democrats won the seat, a genuinely shocking result in a state that is as tightly contested as any in the nation. I mean, Wisconsin is widely viewed by election watchers as what they call the tipping point state, the one state whose outcome will most reflect and determine who wins the national presidential election in November. Donald Trump won that state by just under 23,000 votes in 2016. Jill Karofsky, the Supreme Court candidate, she just won her seat by over 160,000 votes. So this has to be a very, very scary result for Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Joining me now is Ben Wickler. He's the chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, which put a lot of work into this. How did this result happen, Ben?
This result came from 3 big things. The first is that Donald Trump personalized this race. He kept urging people to go out and vote for Dan Kelly. He actually came and endorsed Dan Kelly, the Republican Scott Walker appointee on our Supreme Court, in person in his rally in Milwaukee in January. He made it about himself, and Wisconsin repudiated Trump. The second thing is that this was a backlash against voter suppression. People hate having their votes suppressed, and Republicans were willing to push people into a lethal pandemic because they thought Republican voters would understand less clearly the dangers of this pandemic than Democratic voters. But this was also a win for organizing. Democrats, progressive groups, grassroots organizations across the state, groups led by people of color, African-American and Latino leaders across Wisconsin, rural leaders, and Democratic Party of Wisconsin volunteers made millions of phone calls, text messages, outreach on social media, talked voters through how to request an absentee ballot for the first time in their lives. And we could see the fruits of that in an election where we more than quadrupled the record for the number of absentee ballots. It was about 250,000 in 2016 in a presidential election. This was a state Supreme Court race, and it was over 1 million.
You know, I feel so mixed about what's happened in Wisconsin just because it really was such a travesty that this election took place. And I've seen now, you know, the Supreme Court justices themselves are, you know, they're meeting. They voted absentee. All the folks in the state assembly are practicing physical distancing. Have there been recriminations? Has there been fallout locally there in the aftermath of this undertaking? Like let's not do that again.
I wish that I could tell you that after seeing what voters were willing to do to cast their ballots, that Republicans had realized the error of their ways and run in the other direction. But the Republican Party is insisting on doing this again and again this year. There's a special election for Congress. Tricia Zunker, who's an extraordinary candidate, an associate justice of the Ho-Chunk Nation, a tribal nation Supreme Court. She's running for Congress in northern Wisconsin. Their election is on May 12th. And because Republicans are so intent on following Donald Trump's personal orders that people not be allowed to vote absentee, they're going to force this vast rural community in northern Wisconsin, where vote by mail would make every kind of sense, to vote in person on May 12th. We're going to be organizing for that race, too. And they want to do this again.
Wait. Hold up. They're not going to allow vote by mail, no excuse absentee voting for a May 12th special congressional election?
So I should be clear. We have no excuse absentee voting, but you have to upload a photo of your voter ID and then get a witness to sign your ballot envelope to cast your ballot. And we sued in court. Democrats sued in court to change those rules and ultimately to try to postpone the election and switch to a vote by mail election where everyone receives a ballot in the mail. And Republicans said no. And they sued to our state Supreme Court and the national Supreme Court to stop people from getting a little extra time and a little extra relief to vote safely. And they're doing it again right now. It is hard to believe.
Let me ask you this as a final question. I mean, we're taking the political temperature of the country. We have polling, we've got approval ratings and things like that. And then you've got these special elections. And I remember, I think it was last year or 2 years ago when there was a seat open. Brian Hagedorn, who's a conservative, won that. He won by 3 points. And it was a bummer for Democrats there and for progressive activists that fought against it. What does it say to you about the sort of political temperature of your hotly contested state, this result?
What I see across the state, what we hear in the gigantic number of calls that we make and the calls that flow into our voter protection hotline is a level of intensity of feeling, of conviction that we have got to change that we've never seen at this point in an election year. Last year, Democrats actually bumped up their turnout and Republicans jumped theirs by 30% and won by 5,981 votes, a tiny, tiny margin out of more than 1 million votes cast. This year, Republicans jumped their turnout again to get out the vote for Trump, but we overtopped them with a massive, massive surge. This is going to be the most hard-fought election you can imagine. We're organizing around the clock. If you want to support it, you can go to wisdems.org/donate. I should add, and wisdems.org/volunteer. We're going to be trying to get an absentee ballot into the hands of every single person who is eligible and ready to vote against Donald Trump in the fall, because this battle is going to go to the very last second.
All right. Ben Wickler, chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. Thank you so much.
Thank you.